Thank you very much. So if I could just ask folks in the room, take some seats. Going to be starting the evening. Thank you again for joining us. Good evening. I am Billy Joe Mercado, current committee member of the St. Peter's Business Network, former member of the Board of Regents of St. Peter's University, and a graduate of the class of 2007. I want to welcome and thank you all for joining us this evening. I know it is rainy and dreary out, and this lovely student center doesn't allow us with the rain to see the nice skyline. But I just wanted to share this event is being hosted by the St. Peter's Business Network, as well as the Guarini Institute for Government and Leadership. I want to acknowledge my fellow St. Peter's Business Network host committee members in attend this evening. We volunteer our time to develop programs and expand the network. We have Kathy Carnival, class of 83 from GSK, Annette Corbin, class of 84, Madison Consulting, Andre Cifuentes, class of 04, CBOE Global Markets, Robert Cutro, class of 75, retired from Barclays Capital, Tom Jordan, class of 63, Jordan & Jordan, Rosen Pradhan, class of 2011, Medley Management, and James Rizzo, class of 81, BCB Community Bank. On behalf of my fellow committee members, allow me to share the goal of the St. Peter's Business Network. It's we want to host events like this where we get to unite alumni and friends from all fields of business, provide opportunities to participate, learn, exchange ideas, and explore new professional relationships, as well as stay connected to this wonderful place, right? And for those of you who may not know, our co-host this evening, the Guarini Institute for Government and Leadership at St. Peter's University, is a nonpartisan vehicle that drives public policy discussion of some of the state's most critical issues. The Institute hosts panel discussions with key elected officials, academics, nonprofits, leaders, and others to discuss and debate the opportunities and challenges connected with public policies. Be on the lookout for more exciting programming from the Guarini Institute. We hope you find this evening's program very informative. It's going to be a conversation style, and so I expect it to be very inspiring. At this time, it's my honor to introduce the 22nd president of St. Peter's University, Dr. Eugene J. Kornakia.
Thank you, Billy Joe. Good evening, everyone. Tonight would not be possible without the partnership of the Guarini Institute for Government and Leadership, and we are so grateful for the thought leadership that is the Guarini Institute and for its founder, the Honorable Frank J. Guarini, recipient of an honorary degree from St. Peter's in 1994. And though Frank is not here, I think we should applaud him nonetheless because his generosity and dedication to this city and to the state and to the nation is legendary. And a warm welcome to our trustees, regents, and alumni board members. And of course, a special thanks as always to all the St. Peter's Business Network host committee members for your efforts and enthusiasm in helping us to provide our alumni, members of the business community, and our students with opportunities to learn while networking with others in the field of business. And speaking of students, we have a number of them with us this evening, representing a variety of majors and courses of study. If you haven't done so already, I encourage you to take a moment to meet them and hear their stories personally. Before we know it, they'll be joining the ranks of alumni just like you. Students, please stand so you can be recognized. Thank you. Now, tonight we are fortunate to witness a conversation on the topic of leadership between the Honorable Stephen J. Fulop, Mayor of Jersey City, and someone whom we are privileged to call an alumnus since receiving an honorary degree in 2014, and Raymond Butkus, Executive Lecturer in the School of Business here at St. Peter's University. In a few moments, it will be my pleasure to tell you more about our esteemed speakers, including what Mayor Fulop has done for our community and will continue to do to propel Jersey City forward. But first, let me share with you how we are building upon the momentum of our past so that we too can continue to propel ourselves forward. On Monday, it was announced that St. Peter's has surged in the 2019 U.S. News & World Report Best Colleges rankings. The university ranked highest for best value in the state of New Jersey and 12th overall in the Regional Universities North category. St. Peter's also remains among the top 100 best regional universities in the North, with a considerable climb of 16 places on the list. Now, that's worth applause too, right? I have to get an applause sign up here, you know? These new rankings underscore our ongoing commitment to excellence, access, and affordability. And people are taking notice. We have the fastest growing undergraduate enrollment among New Jersey private universities, thanks to 5 consecutive years of enrollment growth. We rank second, just behind Princeton University, for lowest student debt in the state of New Jersey. As if that weren't enough, in the last 5 years, we have received nearly $8 million in federal investments for STEM and retention programs. And in our School of Business, one of our rapidly rising stars, we just launched the Center for Leadership Studies, which will offer a rigorous program of academic, practical, and experiential opportunities for aspiring leaders to acquire and develop their leadership skills and ability. And finally, although we're never really done, we have been named #1 in the nation for transformation by the American Council on Education Fidelity Investments. Please know that all of this could not have been achieved without alumni and friends of the university, such as you here with us this evening. You have my eternal gratitude for all you do for St. Peter's. Now, onto the program. As you may know, Mayor Fulop was elected the 49th mayor of Jersey City in 2013. Like so many of our alumni, Mayor Fulop is an innovator. Under his leadership, Jersey City became the first city in the state and the 6th city in the country to ensure paid sick leave. He pioneered new ideas for helping prisoners re-enter society. He passed legislation to protect small businesses and encourage more to open shop. And he has made Jersey City one of the greenest cities in the nation. But before his service to Jersey City, as a councilman for 8 years and now as mayor, he served in the United States Marine Corps and spent several years in the financial sector. For all of his service, we are grateful. We are also grateful for the service of Professor Butkus. Ray has been on the faculty of the School of Business for 4 years, where he teaches courses in leadership and management and is the founding director of the new Center for Leadership Studies. Prior to joining St. Peter's, Ray was a successful senior executive of both Fortune 100 and mid-sized corporations. He has more than 35 years of leadership experience in both business and as an officer of the United States Army. And now, without further ado, please join me in welcoming Mayor Steve Fulop and Professor Raymond Butkus.
Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and let me extend my words of welcome to those already expressed by Billy Joe and by President Cornacchia. I'm especially gratified to see students, and in fact, especially gratified to see so many leadership students out there. So welcome, students of leadership, and you know who you, in fact, why don't my students of leadership just stand up here and be recognized. Go ahead. Very good, thank you. I'm delighted to be here this evening. Leadership has been a keen interest of mine and a topic that has intrigued me all my adult life. I took my first course in leadership as an undergraduate when I was 18 years old. And in the ensuing years, I don't think a year has gone by when I haven't learned about, read about, spoken about, written about, studied, and most importantly, practiced leadership. So to have such a distinguished leader as our guest this evening is an absolute pleasure for me, and I'm delighted to be participating in this session this evening. We're going to follow a question and answer format tonight, and these questions will follow three general themes. First, we're going to talk about the nature of leadership, what it is. We're then going to talk about the development of leadership skills. How does one go about getting to be a leader, learning about leadership? And then we're going to talk about some of the challenges associated with leadership. So with that by way of introduction, let's jump into it. Mr. Mayor, since we are in an academic setting, let's start with a question that leadership scholars have debated for decades. And that question, of course, is the nature of leadership relating to whether it's an art or whether it's a science. Now, I think you could say, well, it's a little bit of both, but we're not going to let you take the easy way out this evening. So if you had to put a stake in the ground, which is it more? Is it more art or is it more scientific?
So let me preface, is this too loud? It's okay. So let me preface by saying to everybody here that, first of all, thank you for having me. And Ray and I spoke briefly on Friday, but one of the things that we discussed was that I didn't want to know the questions. We wanted to have a candid conversation and not be scripted. If my opinion on leadership from my experience would be that it's more of an art than a science. And the reason I say that is because I think that every day when you're dealing with people and different issues that they presents different challenges. There's no one size fits all. And so what I find is that each day you are learning a little bit more, it's changing a little bit more, and there's no hard and fast rules on how to deal with any circumstances. I think there's some overarching themes, but no hard rules that define every single circumstance. So I would classify it more as art than science.
So art form. In the artistic interpretation of leadership as an art form, how does one perfect the art form, therefore? Maybe you could share with us that.
I don't think you ever perfect it. I mean, I think that I make mistakes every day. Today we have 3,000 employees that work for me in Jersey City in some way or the other. And every day there are personnel issues that come to light. There's challenges in motivating people to achieve certain objectives. And I think that every day I'm fine-tuning that and learning a little bit. And what I try to do is think back at the end of the week on what I did well and what I didn't do well, and try to think about what I could do better. So when things surface that are similar, I could learn from the experience and, hey, I might have dealt with that situation a little bit better or a little bit differently.
So I noticed that you mentioned every day when you interact with subordinates, you're learning something. John Kennedy once observed that leadership and learning are indispensable to one another. Why? Why is this so?
That leadership and learning are indispensable to each other. I mean, I think ultimately, like, if you are going to evolve and be a better leader, you need to be learning constantly from each of those individual experiences. Each of those individual experiences are unique and they're dealing with people. You know, from a personal standpoint, you know, on my election day in 2013, I was given a small gift that I carried with me for every day since 2013. It's my wallet. It's a small little plaque that somebody had embroidered, or I guess embroidered, and it basically is a quote from Colin Powell talking about failure of leadership is when the troops no longer come to you with the problems. It's either that they no longer think that you care, or they no longer think that you can solve it. Either one's a failure of leadership. And so I think that that's true in learning from each experience and why it's an art form, And it's a constantly an education to get better on that, because you got to think about every interaction and say, how do I improve that, and how do I become a better leader through that process?
I had the good fortune of speaking with General Powell, in fact, introducing General Powell at a session, and he shared, in fact, that quote. He said, the moment your soldiers cease bringing you problems is the same moment you cease becoming a good leader.
Yeah, I think that's accurate.
Yeah.
It's accurate, and it's something I try to live by. I mean, it's in my wallet, so every single day, that's the one thing that's consistent. But, you know, I can't say I've been perfect on that, but I try to be direct with people. I try to be fair. I try to treat people equally, and I try to think about each interaction in a way that they would want me to think about it from their standpoint. And for the most part, I can't say that I've been perfect on this, but I think that most of my interactions, while the person may not agree with the outcome, they would say that I've treated them fairly through the process and tried my best to be direct with them.
So therefore, fairness, justice,
So,
is absolutely essential to leadership.
yeah, I think that once somebody thinks that you're no longer treating equally or being just in the situation, it compromises your integrity, which ultimately compromises your ability to lead. So I think all those characteristics are very much intertwined. And so you have to think about each individual circumstances, although they are different, where the similarity is, and at the same time, how you treated somebody else in a similar situation. And in my situation as mayor, I know that if I treat somebody differently, that first instance we'll certainly find out. We live in a small bubble. Sure. And it'll compromise my ability to be effective in a leadership capacity long term, even though the judgment today might have been perceived as proper or that one improper. There needs to be some consistency there.
Sure, absolutely. Speaking of the origins of leadership, where do they come from? Are they? This is another one of those perennial questions. Are real leaders born, or are they made? It's the nature-nurture question. Or stated differently, you know, can anybody become an excellent leader with the right training, with the right experience? Or is there something innate? Is there something that's related to their DNA that is something it's kind of like perfect pitch in music.
Yeah.
Anyone can learn to play notes on the piano, but very few have perfect pitch. Which is it more like?
Not to sidestep it, but I think it's kind of a hybrid. Your best leaders are learned and also have innate ability that is just naturally given to them. And, you know, I could speak from some of the generals and leadership in the military that I interact with, that they have natural ability, that you don't become a general by accident. You know this from the military as well. It's clear leadership abilities that the best and the cream rises to the top. That said, you can learn to be an effective leader in most capacities. I think there are characteristics that are true to every single circumstance. And so I do think that you can learn and be effective. Can you be a great leader without natural ability? Might be a little bit more challenging, but I think that's anything in life.
What goes into, oh, that's different. I think you can hear me better now. Yeah, okay. I don't have to do that whole introduction again, do I? Okay, good. Well, what is that secret sauce then? What is part of that innate ability? Why is it that there are people that, after a fairly modest amount of interaction, you know, you would walk off a cliff for, and there are other people, if they wanted to show you the way out of a burning building, you'd say, I don't know if I want to follow you. What is that? What is the secret sauce there, Mayor?
That's a tough question. What is the secret sauce? So I think those great leaders that you want to run off a cliff for, I think some of that is innate. But can you learn to be a good manager? Can you learn to be a good leader? I think the answer is yes to that. So
Sure.
there's different degrees of it, like anything else. Not everybody's going to be a great baseball player, but you can certainly learn to be an effective baseball player. And I think it's the same across all traits in leadership.
Okay, all right. Why don't we shift gear and kind of move into the developmental aspect of this? Can you share with us who your personal heroes are in leadership? Who's a role model? I'm interested to recognize and gratified to hear that General Powell is is in there, but who else besides General Powell do you consider to be one of the preeminent leaders? And you can use that in contemporary aspect or historical, whatever you prefer.
I've been fortunate to be exposed to a lot of different people in a lot of different circumstances. The best leader who got me involved, politically speaking, and I think his attributes were unique in how he related to people, was Mayor Cunningham in the mid-2000s. And he was able to recognize the fact that I had potential in politics, was able to motivate me to get involved in it, was able to drag me along into things that I necessarily didn't appreciate at the time, and set me on a good path, which I think not every leader is capable of. I've also been fortunate to deal with people like General Petraeus and build a good relationship with him, and I think that when you deal with senior military personnel, you learn to understand that the leadership that they have is totally at a different level on how they command a room, how they command respect, how they treat people with regards to leadership hierarchy, but at the same time being fair and just. And so, I would think that those would be two good examples of people that I've interacted with that I would say are leaders that you want to emulate. Neither are perfect, but I think they bear a lot of really, really great qualities.
Yeah, fair enough, absolutely. It's been said, and I think it was Tom Peters that said this, that very good leaders get excellent results, and excellent leaders get excellent results, and they develop excellent subordinates to become excellent leaders. Could you share with us how you go about developing your subordinates?
Well, I think I give a lot of flexibility to our senior staff. I think that I've been fortunate to attract, initially in 2013, some great people to work with me, which I think is important to really driving forward. And the best test for me on how they're developing and how people perceive them is when they leave Jersey City, what type of job opportunities that they have from here. And it's pretty clear to see if there's upward momentum and if they're growing and how other people perceive them. And I've been fortunate that I think for the most part, the people that have left Jersey City government, they've gotten some great opportunities elsewhere, and it shows upward trajectory. So I do my best to give them flexibility. I do my best to give them a lot of leeway on direction of the city. And I've been fortunate enough that I've had some great people to work with.
Staying on the theme of subordinate development,
Yeah.
there's a maxim in leadership that goes that you should always praise in public, but admonish in private. Is there a time when a leader should chew out a subordinate in public?
My experience is it doesn't necessarily drive results ever. I don't think there's a blanket rule, but I can't say that I've been in a circumstance where I think that will drive more results from the individual or inspire the rest of the room, thinking that we were fair or just in that circumstance. Inevitably, somebody in that room will think that you were unfair and you approach that improperly, and that will compromise essentially what they view you and maybe others in the room. So, the conversations that have been tough and direct in that regard happen more in private, I think. And I'm not big on praising the public praising either. I'm kind of uncomfortable, I think, myself with doing that, going overboard on that front, because it comes across as insincere to me. And I think that part of the challenge, or the part of the goal of being effective from a leadership standpoint, is being authentic and sincere. And people have to believe that when you say something, it's direct and true and sincere, and it's not just you getting in front of a room and saying, I want to thank this person and that great person, and you did great work, because that doesn't achieve a result either.
So no gratuitous praise.
I try not to be, and it's not really consistent with my personality. People might say that you're not so warm and fuzzy, but I view that a lot of the time when people do that as, very insincere when they do that in public rooms. If I have something great to say to somebody because they've done a good job, I will say it to them, but in more of a personal setting, and I think it does more to drive an outcome, a future outcome from them, because it's authentic.
Sure.
I'm really appreciative of that work that they did, and I felt the need to go find them and say it and tell them that, I, and I'm sure others, recognize it.
So your rule of thumb is both praise and admonishment should be done in a more personal, private setting.
I think so. I think it drives better results on both fronts when you do it that way.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. So let's talk about doing the right thing. Kind of continuing on this theme. General Schwarzkopf, Norman Schwarzkopf, once said, that the truth is, you always know the right thing to do. The hard part is doing it. Can you share with us a time when maybe you most acutely felt the challenge and the tug between knowing the right thing and the practicality of actually doing it as a leader?
Well, this is one of those questions I wish we were prepared for. Let me say this. The first day, the day that I was sworn in 2013, I was walking into the back of City Hall and I was approached by an individual who was a former mayor in Hudson County. And he came up to me and he said, congratulations. He wasn't a supporter of mine when I ran, but he was excited that I won. And he said, do you think you want to get reelected and run again? And I said to him, I don't know. I haven't sworn in yet. The swearing in is at 12 o'clock today, but I'm excited and hopefully it'll be a good experience. And then he says to me, he goes, I have some advice if you want to get reelected. And I said, okay. And he said, okay, what you should do over the next 4 years, and you'll 100% get reelected because nobody will be mad, is do nothing. And I said, okay, explain. And he said, well, look, he said that the best and easiest outcome for an elected official whose objective is to ultimately get reelected is that you try to upset nobody. You don't push the envelope at all, and you don't upset the apple cart. And if you do nothing, so to speak, or very, very little, nobody gets mad, and inevitably they'll get into the booth. And this is why incumbents generally do get elected, is they'll get in the booth and they'll say, he wasn't so bad. He didn't do anything. And so there is an easy route in my business as it relates to being reelected, and that ultimately means that you don't really push the envelope on anything. You kind of accept the status quo. And what I've tried to do over the last 4 years, and I'm thankful that the people in Jersey City have appreciated it, is really kind of push hard on initiative after initiative where I say, how can you be the best, not in the community, but the best in the country? How do we actually make Jersey City be a model? I had a meeting today with an organization that we hired to work on a museum in Journal Square. And somebody brought it up to us earlier today. And we hired, arguably, but I think it's in the conversation, the premier organization in the country to design this project at the Passide building. And they came in today for the introductory meeting. They've already been hired. They're expensive. And they asked us our vision for it and our plans and how much community engagement and what do we think about that. And I said to them that the community engagement is important. I probably shouldn't be saying this truthfully, but it is what it is. But I said the community engagement is important, although it's not the end-all and be-all, because people might look at what the possibility is there from a very parochial sense, where they say, you know what, the arts spaces in Jersey City are a scarcity, which is true. It's in every city across the country. And they'll say, we need more community art spaces, and this is the opportunity for this building, which I said is a reality. But I said to them, it's not really what I want you to do. I want you to think bigger on how do you make this a national destination and really, really do something really special there. And so they felt great when they left, and I felt great about the same thing. But ultimately, I think there's an easy route in elected office where it's you don't really push, and then there's a harder route, which is the right route, which is you're looking for transformational change.
And I think that's a great illustration. Maybe let's continue with this theme of contemporary politics, which certainly over the last several decades has grown increasingly partisan, and public discourse, it seems, is increasingly bombastic. It's filled with acrimony. Compromise and accommodation are viewed by some as weak. Some have characterized this as the tribalization of American politics. What special challenges does that present to the elected leader?
The challenges of a lack of compromise in today's politics.
Yes, indeed. The tribalization.
Yeah, so I think that mayors have it very differently. I think organizations today, if you think about our federal government, it certainly is very executive driven for sure, and it's been like this for a long time. Mayors have a unique challenge where we don't have the ability to be partisan. There is no partisan way, as LaGuardia said, to pick up trash or plow snow. It has to get done ultimately, and you're on the front line of getting blamed. So one skill that we've been able to develop, I think our team and myself, is better consensus building, is how to try and get 5 people on that city council to believe in what you're saying and to move forward on that initiative. When you look at the partisan politics that you see on the federal level, they don't have that necessity to move and compromise because they're rewarded essentially for not doing that. And ultimately, because you're executive driven on the federal level, what they say doesn't really matter. Like you look at the Senate hearings, right? It's a big charade, right? Everybody's already decided how they're going to vote, but they're sitting there on TV talking a lot about it, right? It doesn't really matter ultimately. So at the mayoral level, and one thing that I relish about this job is that there's an opportunity to get results, and there's an opportunity to build consensus, and you can't, although I have my beliefs, you can't be overly partisan because ultimately you need to drive results because there is no partisan way to deliver services.
Yeah, great, wonderful. I think we've got time maybe for one more, and then we're going to take a few questions from the audience.
Sure.
So, Mr. Mayor, Stern School MBAs, Columbia MPAs, and Goldman Sachs Associates do not leave to join the Marine Corps.
Right.
You did.
I did.
And you took that extraordinary step, if I may say so, that required courage and fortitude. 2 questions. Why? And what did you learn in the Marine Corps that you could have never learned at Goldman Sachs?
Oh, so much. So let me start with why, and a lesson that I learned through that decision in my life. My family's first generation American, immigrants, Holocaust survivors. Many in my family died. There were 37 people taken to Auschwitz or the concentration camps, of which 7 returned. And then they eventually immigrated here. So I have always felt, my parents would say this, a debt of gratitude to this country and really feel special about the things that were offered here. I never thought that I would end up in politics. I registered to vote very, very late in life. I registered to vote the same day Glenn Cunningham got me involved to run for Congress on a suicide mission against Bob Menendez. I registered that day also. And so I made the decision because when I looked at my life at that point, I was really thinking about 30 years forward. What do I want to think I did in the days after 9/11? Do I want to think that I spoke about the importance of service, or do I want to think that I actually did something meaningful at that moment in time? And I always believed in my heart that I was one who was willing to serve if the moment presented itself, that it was needed or the opportunity was there. And that was the point where it was, to me, like a test of character. Was I really willing to do what I always believed or said that I was willing to do? And so I started in the days afterwards, like exploring which branch to enlist in and how to do that. I knew nothing about it. I was trying to negotiate with the recruiter in the Marine Corps to not shave my head. I knew nothing about this, And so
I bet that went over well.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. So, I went to Paris Island. I went on the enlisted side, and it was the best experience of my life because although I had degrees and a different education, it exposed me to a lot of people in this country that come from very, very different backgrounds. You're talking about the 18, 19, 20-year-old people that volunteer to serve because it's their only way out, and they might be doing it for the GI Bill, or they're inspired like I was. But a totally different type of person. And through that process, I think I learned more about people, and my horizon was broadened than any other experience in my entire life. On leadership, when you go through boot camp on the enlisted side or the officer side, you understand how much resources and how serious leadership attributes are drilled into every single person there. And when you think about the most important positions just in Paris Island, the most important prestigious Marine Corps billets that you can have are guarding embassies, which the U.S. Marine Corps does, or being a drill instructor in the Marine Corps, because those people, in many ways, the Marine Corps would say embody leadership characteristics on how they present themselves during those 13 weeks. They're squared away, they're straightforward, they're tough, they're compassionate when they need to be compassionate, and that all those attributes are like on steroids in those 13 weeks of boot camp. And you'll learn to appreciate different characteristics that I don't think you could necessarily just learn in a book. It comes through experience, but that's like a crash course in it. So for me, I made the decision because I believe in this country, and it was thankfully the best experience and the best decision probably of my entire life, career-wise.
Well said. Okay, do we have the questions from the audience? I think we have the cards. Who has our
So, if you have a question, use one of the cards in the bowl and write it down. The students will come around and collect your question.
Can I just ask a question? Mayor, you know me quite well. What advice do you have for the students and the young alumni here who might be considering careers in public service, whether seeking elected office or in the civil service?
The question was about advice that for young people that are thinking about elected office. I think the fact that you're here, not because we're speaking here, but I think that you're interested in the Leadership Institute is a really important thing. And the question is, why do I say that? If you go back 20 years when I was in college, and I'm sure the people who are older here would attest to this as well, there was this emphasis on humanities and psychology and sociology and English. Those were the things that you studied in college. And you develop some skills, and then over time, that gradually transitioned towards people talking more about STEM-based educations and engineering and math and science and coding. That's kind of where we are today in the moment, or last year in the moment. But if you start to really think about what's going to be in 5 years or 6 years or 4 years, the attributes that you really need to develop, I would argue that it's less about STEM-based sort of education, and it's more back to the humanities and the soft skills. And the reason I say that is because machines are always going to be able to do math better than students, or better than people. And coding will always be better by machines because you're getting to a place of artificial education, of artificial intelligence. Now, ultimately, understanding values and compassion and critical thinking, those are things that a machine can never do. So you fine-tuning that in places like this, I think develops a skill set that's really important for setting the stage for the next 5 or 10 years. People who are investing their time today in just simple engineering or simple science or simple coding, I don't think they're thinking what happens in a world where machines are dominant in that way. Machines will never, ever be dominant in understanding good leadership attributes or critical thinking or any of those. So I think that people are here is, I think, a good step in that direction, and you want to continue down that path.
Okay, question from the audience. Leaders sometimes face severe criticism, big disappointments. How do you as a leader move forward after facing criticism or keen disappointment?
I have the Jersey Journal, thankfully, so it's a daily. I think that what I've learned over time is that when I was elected at 27 to the council, and people would still argue that I am, although I think that I've approached it differently over time. They would say, here's a young guy in a hurry. I was always thinking about what's next and how to do that quickly. And what I've learned over time is that it's a long road with lots of ups and downs and successes and failures, and especially with interacting with people. And you can't take any of it personally, to be honest with you. And so I've gotten better at that. And I think that looking long-term at just over the long arch, building in a gradually escalating direction, I'm comfortable with.
Okay, very good. Since your election, Mr. Mayor, what's been the biggest challenge that you've faced as the leader of our fair city?
From a just a public policy standpoint,
Yes.
the biggest challenge is that there are pockets of poverty that are very stubborn to crap, that lead to gun violence and education challenges, and those socioeconomic challenges are very, very hard to move, and it takes a long time to move, and it continues to be a big challenge. I think we're making inroads, but it's tough.
Okay. How are we doing on time? 2 more? Okay. All right. Let's take a couple more from the audience, and then we'll do one wrap up.
Okay.
Mayor, you're leading one of the most diverse cities in America, and that presents presumably special challenges of leadership. What are those challenges, and what steps are you taking to be a effective leader in view of the tremendous diversity of cultures that we have here in Jersey City?
So I would say the best lesson that I've had on this, and I go back to the campaign when I ran for city council, actually. I was running as an outsider at the time, and few outsiders ever win in Hudson County. And I was an outside council candidate, and few people gave me a chance to win. And one of the few communities that reached out to me was the Pakistani Muslim community here in Jersey City, because they also felt disenfranchised, that nobody had reached out to them. And growing up in a Jewish day school environment up until high school, and in a relatively sheltered Jewish household, I never interacted in a mosque or with an imam, and I didn't really know what to expect. So they invited me over to the mosque on Montgomery, and we had a meeting with the 30 or 40 prominent leaders, and they were asking about the same things that every other community would ask about. Traffic lights and education and safety and their children's future. And I thought the conversation went relatively well. And when I got up to leave, the imam says to me at the time, he says, Fulop, he says, that's an interesting last name. What kind of background are you? What's your last name? And I paused and I thought about it. And I was at the time thinking more about my political situation and how he would judge me. And so I said my family's Eastern European. And I should have said that I'm Jewish, and I went to a Jewish day school because I thought that's what he was asking, but I said I'm Eastern European. I left and I felt horrible about myself. I felt that if my grandmother had heard me say that, she would turn over in her grave. And I left and I thought a lot about it. And 2 weeks later was a Jewish holiday, an obscure Jewish holiday for non-Jews called Purim. And the imam called me that day to wish me a good holiday. And I share that with you because, here I was judging him and his culture and his value, and he already knew what I was, and he wasn't judging me ultimately. He was the bigger person than me. And so I share that with you because the blessing of such a diverse city is that you get exposure to so many different communities and so many different cultures. I try not to judge any of them and just keep an open mind about learning everything and being inclusive to everybody the same I want them to treat me. And I've learned a lot, and I'm thankful because this city is such a special canvas with so many different communities and cultures. In 3 weeks, the Coptic Pope will be coming here. It'll be the first time in 20 years that he'll be visiting Jersey City. And at the same time that he's coming here, we have the largest Indian community in the state of New Jersey, the largest Filipino community in the state of New Jersey, and a large Pakistani Muslim community, which continues to be my biggest supporter. So, I think that it's such an asset that we do, and I try to cherish that every day, and I think I've learned from it in a lot of ways.
Great, thank you. Well, speaking of Jewish holidays, I'm mindful that the Day of Atonement is just around the corner next week, and I feel I have to atone a bit for some of those challenging questions that I've asked you. So I'm going to give you a real softball one.
Okay.
And here it goes. When will we get a windmill in Jersey City?
I don't think it's on the horizon, but I will tell you this, that we continue to push green initiatives and green infrastructure and green roofs, and we're purchasing our first electric vehicles. We're the first in the state to install electric charging stations throughout the city. It's under contract right now. So we are diligent about doing our part to make sure that we are thinking about the planet in 20 years and 50 years and 100 years. The wind component I don't know if that's the best fit for a city today. And what I try to think about often in my job, and hopefully you've kind of maybe got a glimpse into this, is not necessarily think about what are people doing today, but saying, what are they going to be doing in 5 years? What type of education is important for 5 years? What type of museum or what's the museum of the 21st century? Not trying to compete with what's across the river. Those are the sort of things. So when I think of windmills and the traditional avenue on that, I come to the conclusion that say, is that ultimately the best solution for how to push the envelope for a green city? So the short answer is it's not on the horizon today, but it doesn't mean that we're not going to continue to push green initiatives.
Okay, well, why don't we wrap it up with the following? And, you know, as we look back on the history of the 20th century, we see many, many examples of great leadership that have been used for great good. And great good has emerged from strong and powerful leaders. King, Roosevelt, Gandhi all come to mind. Sadly, in the same century, we recall Hitler and Stalin and Pol Pot, and recognize that strong leadership can sometimes be used for great evil. Here at St. Peter's, our Catholic heritage, or Jesuit identity, helped guide the development of our aspiring leaders here on campus. Mayor, could you share with us some of the foundations of your own leadership development? What are some of the things that have served and serve as your moral compass, if you will?
Can you expand on that a little bit?
What things in your background,
Yeah.
in your education, in your family life, have served as kind of a grounding that says, you mentioned before when you were speaking of do the right thing. What helps you discern and differentiate the right thing versus the expedient thing?
So I mentioned the time that, I went to yeshiva growing up, a strong Judeo-Christian background, and learning the Old Testament, the unwritten Bible, so to speak, Gemara and Mishnah, as the Jewish people would call it. It's a lot of Jewish law and critical thinking around that. And I think that is a baseline for moral values and understanding good and bad. I think I had a very, very strong family foundation as well that instilled in me the value system that I have today and the compass that I have today. And it's not to say that I don't make mistakes, but I do think that I have a strong understanding of, what's right and wrong ultimately. And I try to gravitate towards every day making sure that I live my life in a way that I could be proud when I go to sleep at night. And I'm thankful for the most part. I think I have. It hasn't been perfect, but I think that for the most part, I have more wins than losses on that front.
Very good. Mayor, I'd like to thank you for being here, and I'd like all of our audience to give a round of applause to our esteemed guest.
Thank you again. Thank you again, Mayor Fulop. Happy New Year. Thank you again, Professor Butkus. Folks, friends, family, thank you again. Thank you very much for attending. Your attendance makes being a part of this committee very value-filled. Please, 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 before you leave, there are surveys on your table. Could you just fill it out for us so that way we know and we can start tailoring more events towards what our community wants. And we do all of this so that you guys can take advantage of it. Also, social media, it's 2018, it's very big. Please follow St. Peter's, Instagram, Facebook, things that probably exist that I don't even know exist. So just follow. Also, if you haven't already, every little bit helps. Please make a gift to the St. Peter's Fund. Please see Claudia at registration. She's a lovely lady waving back there. So, once again, welcome to St. Peter's. Thank you for attending. We hope you guys had a wonderful evening. And once again, thank you, Mayor Fulop and Professor Butkus. It was very, very enlightening. Thank you.